Are you a parent navigating the complexities of co-parenting, family court, or even domestic violence? If you are looking for ways to help protect your children and build a strong and supportive community around you, then look no further. Gray Minds Think Alike is your go-to resource for everything related to the complexities of family life. Join us as we dive into thoughtful conversations with experts and explore practical tips and strategies for tackling the challenges of parenthood in the throes of adversity so that no parent feels alone and every child's safety is protected.
Welcome back to Gray Minds Think Alike, where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most with experts who enlighten, inspire, and empower. Today's episode centers on something so many women carry quietly: complex shame and how it shapes our relationships, our choices, and the way we see ourselves. My guest today is Dr. Zoe Shaw, a licensed psychotherapist and relationship expert. Dr. Shaw has dedicated her career to helping women untangle the deep-rooted shame that keeps them stuck in painful patterns. She is the author of the upcoming book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, which offers a compassionate, practical roadmap for healing complex shame, rebuilding self-trust, and reclaiming confidence through intentional relationships and sisterhood. Together, we'll explore how shame operates beneath the surface, why it often keeps women silent or stuck, and what real healing looks like when women learn to reconnect with themselves and with each other. So welcome, Zoe. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to get into all of this.
Thank you, Allie. Thank you. What a wonderful introduction.
Well, if you can just give our listeners a little brief background and how you got started into relationships specifically.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about my development of complex shame. Now, I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm a mom of 5 amazing kiddos. And
I commitment right there.
Yeah. And I live in Southern California, but go all the way back to where some of my complex shame first developed. I was a Black girl who grew up in an all-white farming community in rural Maryland, and I developed a lot of racial identity shame through that experience. And when I got pregnant, and I also grew up in a fundamental Christian home. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community, and my parents' response at that time was, "That's not happening here." Right. And so they sent me away to a pregnancy home where I gave birth to my daughter unmedicated in a hospital in Virginia with the understanding that I would come back home without a child, which I did. I came back home, left my daughter in the hospital, and came back home to pretend like nothing had ever happened. And that was kind of the genesis of my complex shame. And that's not a common story. Right. And so obviously that's not the only way that complex shame gets developed. Right. That's how mine started. Right. And so I really dealt with my trauma and my grief by doubling down on accomplishments. I did extremely well in school. I did extremely well athletically, got a scholarship to UCLA, which brought me all the way here to California. Right. Competed at a very high level and doubled down and got my bachelor's, got my master's degree in psychology, my doctorate. Got married very early to kind of exonerate myself from the purity culture. Right. And that's when I really began to try to understand myself. I was a clinician already and really trying to kind of unpack what had happened to me in my childhood. And my complex shame showed up in codependency and a very unhealthy marriage. I gave birth to my first kept daughter. She was born with a rare genetic disorder. And in the NICU, when we didn't really know if she was going to live or die, I really attached to the story of placing my first daughter for adoption and felt like I was being punished. And that's when I really went into a shame spiral. So fast forward, I figured out what was going on with me. I figured out what was going on with a lot of my clients, and I called it complex shame. Okay. And it's different.
What is, if you could just give us a little definition of what complex means.
Absolutely. And so that's how I came to helping other women and men really untangle complex shame for themselves. And so complex shame is different than simple shame. But before we can really talk about shame, we need to talk about guilt, because a lot of people don't really understand the difference, even though Brene Brown has done a really great job of explaining it. Guilt is a very healthy emotion when it's valid. Now, a lot of mamas, a lot of people have invalid guilt, but when it's valid, guilt is a wonderful emotion that helps us change behavior. So guilt says, I did something to break my moral code. And your response as a human is, I don't want to do that anymore, right? So I'm either going to go back and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to try to repair. Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't sometimes. But what I'm also going to do is say, I'm not going to do that anymore. So guilt changes behavior in a healthy way. Shame is a physiological emotion message that says, I am wrong. And if you are wrong, there is nothing to do but hide. And so shame is unhealthy in all the ways it shows up because shame makes us hide. And when we hide, we distance ourselves, from relationships. And so a lot of people misunderstand that. Now, the cool thing about shame is that when you talk about it and someone else gives you compassion, someone else says, me too, someone else says, I get it, your shame will literally melt away.
Right. And I feel like the more you talk about it, like it's not shameful anymore, right? Because it's normal.
Yeah. So then your shame melts away unless you have complex shame. If you have complex shame and you talk about your shame does nothing, but often it just goes deeper. And so here are the reasons why. The first, number one, complex shame does develop a little more complexly than regular shame. You have a lot of shit attached to it. It's kind of like the snowball rolling down the hill, right? And it just gathers more and more and more shame. So it's very layered. But what happens with complex shame is that when you do that thing of being vulnerable and I tell somebody, if they give me that compassion, there's a part of me that says, but you don't really understand. If you knew all the things, which you can't possibly know all the things, you would not give me that compassion. And so our shame stays and goes deeper. The other way that complex shame stays essentially is that someone may be vulnerable and then they're gaslit for their shame. This happens a lot in marginalized communities. Someone will say, oh, you're overreacting. That didn't really happen. You're not believed, whatever it is. And so then you just feel more unworthy, right? And your shame just goes deeper. So that's the difference between simple shame and complex shame.
Well, I think a lot of our listeners who are going through maybe a divorce or, it's stuck in a relationship probably experience that more than not. So I guess, how does the shame keep them stuck in these difficult relationships? Like, even when they know something isn't right?
Yeah. So, what I didn't explain is my whole experience of being in a dysfunctional marriage for 28 years and finally getting out. I experienced, number one, a lot of codependency, which kept me stuck, and shame in the relationship. And then there's shame involved in either staying in an unhealthy relationship or getting out of an unhealthy relationship. Both things create shame. And what was your question? I lost your question.
I was just saying, what keeps you stuck in the relationships? Yeah. Like, even when they know something is wrong.
Yeah. So let's talk about what gets you into that relationship to begin with. When you are living in a shame-filled space internally, right? You are often trying to prove yourself. You are often kind of borrowing other people's emotions to make yourself feel good. You are trying to find worthiness in other people, right? And you feel like you are only worth something to people if you can do something or give them something or create an experience for them, an emotional experience. Codependency, right? And a lot of people think codependency is weak, but codependency is actually a desire and need to control. I want to control your emotions so that I feel better, right? And so people get stuck in these codependent relationships. And the really sad thing that happens in shame-based relationships is that you're showing up in a relationship. And when someone loves you, which sometimes is happening, someone can truly be loving you. But because if you remember, what shame makes us do is hide, right? Shame makes us hide. And so when we're hiding in our relationship and someone loves us, then what actually happens is we feel very unloved because we think, consciously or subconsciously, if they knew me, they wouldn't really love me. And so then we respond to them as if they don't love us. And we've got this very unhealthy dynamic going. And that can both keep us in unhealthy relationships and that can get us in those unhealthy relationships.
Right. Well, what are some of the earliest signs that, I guess, shame and not just weakness, is driving someone's decision?
Shame and not weakness? I would say that most people's decisions are driven by strength. The problem is
fear.
Well, but it's still attached to strength, right? The problem. And so let's talk about that for a minute, because I believe strongly that all behavior makes sense in its context. And so if you think of, for instance, a soldier on the battlefield, think of all the armor that he needs, the guns, the grenades, the armor, all this stuff, right?
Right.
And let's say, and that's very functional. That helps him stay strong. That's strength, right? He uses it to take care of himself, to take care of others on the battlefield. When he comes back home to the US, maybe, and he's going to go hang out in the mall with his kids, if he's still carrying all of that, it's not functional anymore. He's going to get arrested. It's just not going to work, right?
Right.
And we do that. We do that. We carry all of that armor that was really strong that we built to protect ourselves in our childhood, and we bring it into our relationships.
Right.
And so it can seem like weakness, but it's actually strength that's no longer needed. And we overwork and we hustle. And yeah, it's fear because I have to protect myself.
Right.
And the person listening who feels very weak can recognize that your choices, your choice to stay, your choice to choose that person, all of the ways that you respond in court to your attorney, to, the co-parent.
Right.
That is what I call your phantom critic trying to keep you safe.
Right.
And it's not about weakness. It's about you trying to be safe. And so when we can start to ask ourselves, okay, is this behavior still keeping me safe? It did at one time or you wouldn't be doing it. If you can ask, is this behavior still keeping me safe? And if the answer is no, then it's time to start looking at, how can I change it? And what would keep me safe now?
I know, like for me personally, when I was in my friendship with my son's father, we were not in a relationship. We had a child together and he chose not to be a part of his life until he was 6 months old. And the 4 years that he was here, it was very tumultuous and he was narcissistic and he used coercive control. So ultimately, I had to just ignore a lot of text messages or messages that I would get just to sort of, like you said, to sort of cope with that in my life and my life with my son as my response. So that was my way of dealing with it, was just by not replying, because the more I would reply, it's sort of like fueling the fire.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, with that relationship, it helped me, but in the end result, I needed court interference or intervention and people to step in, and they just didn't. They just won't. So it's hard and I know a lot of other parents going through, like in family court, they need help and they can't get it. So they're often dealing with a lot of emotions and feelings and behavior, saying like, I don't know what else to do.
Right. Yeah, you're not responding to him was a healthy boundary. Obviously, he was very dangerous and you didn't get the help that you deserved. And I know a lot of people that are out there dealing with toxic people, with narcissistic people, with dangerous people, definitely have that sense of helplessness, right? And not only that, but when you are interacting, or even when you're not responding to text messages, but all of these, all of the energy, all of the communication that does get through, that you're not responding to, it affects you and it can kind of warp your own self-view. And so
absolutely.
It's taxing, which does tire you. And if we think of like a body's immune system, there's only, when we keep attacking it with viruses, it does tend to get weaker, right? It feels weaker.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do in those situations is we have to, number one, know this energy coming to me has the potential to make me see myself differently, to even make me see myself through their eyes. Right? This does have the potential to weaken me. And so I do have to double down on finding ways to care for myself, on finding the help. Maybe, obviously, we need to still do what we need to do legally. I know that it doesn't always work that way and the system is not always for you. But your work is to figure out, how can I continue to take care of myself? And how can I put up a healthy wall and not be a sponge? Because when we have abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, without intention, we are going to be a sponge and take it in. And we've got to learn how to create this healthy wall that's not taking in all of the verbal abuse.
Right. Now, piggybacking off that, you talk a lot about healing the relationship with yourself.
Right.
What does that actually mean and where does one begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. It all starts with you. It does. Your choices, you being able to take accountability, not for any abuse that happened to you, but how you show up and how you continue to show up, right? And it's about creating that radical accountability, but also really getting to know yourself. We spend so much time, especially if we are codependent, making sure that we know other people so well so that we can manage their emotions, that we don't spend a lot of time getting to know ourselves because we're just reacting and trying to respond and trying to protect. right? And so if we recognize that our relationship with ourselves is a reflection of all of our other relationships, right? And our relationship with ourselves is the most important because it determines all of the relationships that we will have. It determines what we accept. It determines how we show up. And so what I mean by that is learning how to date yourself. What I mean by that is asking yourself the kinds of questions you would ask somebody that you really want to get to know and not just stopping with the surface answers, right?
Right.
In my next book that I'm writing called Get Over Your Mother, I ask a very simple question, which is, what's your favorite color and why, right? I can tell you my favorite color is blue. And it's because it was my mother's favorite color. And that influenced it being mine. And so I had to start asking myself, without my mother's influence, what would my favorite color be? Of course, I have my mother's influence, so I can't necessarily answer that question. But just beginning to question, is that my favorite color? Or did I just need to be more like my mother? Did I just want to be like her?
It could be a little of both.
It could. But the question is, let's start asking ourselves questions about ourselves and our behavior.
Right.
Because here's the thing. I think I said earlier, all behavior makes sense in its context. And that means all the behavior you've chosen, the people you chose to date, the people you chose to marry, the work you do, it's for a reason. And so understand that context. Right. What's your context?
Right. Well, my favorite color is gray because life isn't black or white. It's gray. So
when did that happen? When did your favorite color develop?
I'm not sure. I've always loved the color gray. Obviously, it's neutral. It's soothing. And then I just realized when I was picking out names to name my child was on the list. And the more I came back to it, the more I loved it. And then right before he was born, I saw it has to be I think it was Bachelor in Paradise or some ridiculous reality TV show. And they said something about life isn't rainbows and unicorns, it's gray. And I was like, oh my God, that's it right there. And ironically, my first job after college was at Gray Advertising in New York City.
Wow.
So I feel like this name has been with me forever. Yeah. And now since Greyson passed, I see the word gray everywhere, in any kind of context. I was just in Hawaii and our hotel was at its own private beach and it was called Gray's Beach. Okay, weird. I turned on the TV in our hotel room and it said Gray Information TV or something, whatever. I was like, okay, this is weird. He is with me everywhere. So now that we just totally got off topic here. Yeah, Gray.
That's okay. How did you spell his name?
EY. Greyson. Yeah.
And how old
So that's where Gay Minds Think Alike and the nonprofit Grayson's Choice. Yeah. So let's talk about women in friendships and romantic relationships, motherhood. How does shame show up in sort of different types of relationships? Maybe not just with your partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that you talk about motherhood because like I said, my next book is called Get Over Your Mother. There's two ways that I want you to think about shame showing up. The first is wherever in the world you want to hide, whenever you think, I don't want them to know that, or, I need to not let them know that. That's where your shame is. That's exactly where your shame is. So that's how you identify it. And then what shame makes us do is hide. And part of the way that we hide is we agree. So we agree to things that we really don't want to. We agree to things to keep the peace. We agree to things to keep a friendship. And we agree to things to keep the love of our mother.
Yeah.
And so that's how shame can show up in our relationships is through hiding and agreement when your soul really doesn't agree to whatever the thing is. Yeah.
Right. Now, let's talk about parents for a second. As you mentioned, mothers. I know for me in particular, I have a lot of guilt when it comes to situational things with my mom. She's getting older and I just constantly feel guilt of I should be doing more or how can I be helping her? Even though I'm trying to just get through the day in, my busy, hectic world. And it's just sort of hard to because I have so much to do, but I have a lot of guilt. So how does one, I guess you make peace with it?
The question is, where does it come from? Where were you taught that you should be doing something other than what you're doing right now?
Probably from her. Probably They call it Jewish guilt, where they're saying, why are you not doing more? Why are you not bringing me dinner? Why are you not stopping by? Why are you not spending more time with me? And, part of it is true. She's getting older and she's not going to be here much longer. So I do want to spend more time, but then I just often just get busy and wrapped up and then it turns into guilt.
Right. And so the message then that goes with your guilt is what?
To spend more time with her, I guess.
Well, that's the action.
Or to want to.
The message is, I'm a bad daughter.
I don't necessarily think I'm a bad daughter. I think it's pretty normal to just be busy. It's just my messages is just, I don't know. It's just, I feel bad. I feel bad for her because she's alone.
Okay. So it's your responsibility then to take care of your mother and make sure she's not alone.
I know if it were me and I was, living alone and elderly, I would want someone to buy.
So there's an empathy, and then you're feeling like you're not acting on your empathy, and so you feel guilt.
Yeah. But I'd say probably a lot of people feel that same guilt with their parents in some fashion,
I think
especially.
It depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the messages that our parents sent to us about what our responsibilities were, right? Some families are very clear, like, I am your responsibility when you're an adult. And therefore, if you don't do that, you're a bad child, right?
Right.
Other parents make different declarations. When it comes to guilt, I think what we need to ask ourselves is, have I broken my moral code?
Okay.
If your answer is yes, it's healthy guilt. Now, maybe you need to adjust your moral code because maybe your moral code, the way it developed, was in a way that's a bit dysfunctional. And so you want to ask yourself that too. So if your answer is yes, I broke my moral code, then you want to say, is this a moral code I want to continue to uphold for myself?
Okay.
Right? And then if the answer is yes, then there change needs to happen. So you need to do something. You need to take action. If the answer is no, I haven't broken my moral code, but I still feel guilty. I still feel terrible because they think I did something bad, or, for some other reason that's been conditioned, then the answer is I need to give that back to whoever gave it to me. Right. And then that's the work to do, is how do I give this back? If I haven't broken my moral code, it's not valid guilt. How do I take this feeling and give it back to them?
Right. Well, yeah, that would be nice. That'd be nice if I could do that. But
if you could figure out how to take it and give it back.
Yeah. I mean, look, she's, older. She's living alone. She just had a cancer scare. She fell yesterday. So there's a lot she goes through, as her child. I think it is part of my duty to make sure that my mother is cared for.
Right.
Just like she would for her daughter.
And so then part of what you feel is valid guilt.
Yes.
But do you have to do it all? Or do you need to make sure that...
Sadly, I have 2 other sisters and everything is left to me.
So then it's about boundaries, because part of the guilt we have is this idea and this message that I have to carry it all, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially in families, if we want to talk about shame and family dynamics, is that people in families tend to play very clear roles. And it sounds like you've been given the role of, she'll do it, right?
Well, I don't speak to my other 2 sisters. So yeah, one lives in California and she's just not here. And the other one just has no responsibility whatsoever. So
you've still been given that role.
Yes.
Yeah. Been given the role. Yeah.
Right.
And
all right, let's talk about your book.
You're like, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about your book. Stronger in the Difficult Places. Correct? Okay. So this grew out of your work. And what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, the story about my life that I just told you inspired me to write it, and how I came to understand what complex shame is and how it shows up in a person's life. And my goal is what I've been doing for a while now, is helping people untangle that complex shame and get over it. Okay. And so that's what inspired me to write the book. And the book explains complex shame through the story of my life. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some practical everyday steps that you can tell our listeners right now to maybe just sort of start untangling the shame in their lives? What is one thing that they could do today?
Right. Well, the first thing they can do is ask themselves, where am I hiding? That's how they figure out where the shame is, like I said before. So if you figure that out, then you've got to start asking yourself questions about that shame. So where did it come from? What are the phantom critic words that are being said to me? So what happens with our shame is that in the time that it develops, we develop these stories, right? And we tell these stories to ourselves. I'm a bad daughter. I'm not very smart. I don't deserve whatever I have. And so when we leave a family, when we leave a relationship, we think that we've gotten over that often. But what we actually do is we pack up all the words that were said to us, and now we start to own them. We put them on and we say them to ourselves. And so you've got to start to become aware. What are those words that I'm saying to myself?
Right.
And are they true? Now, the thing with shame is that because you feel unworthy, you feel like you are blamed for something, you carry the blame. And when something happens to you and you may even be victimized, there's still a part of you that feels blame, right? And so what we also have to do is start to untangle that blame. And the way that we do that is you need to identify, what do I blame myself for?
Right.
What should I have done? What shouldn't I have done? What's mine? What's not mine? Right? And if you're able to take accountability for the thing, so for instance, something terrible happened you were victimized. Not your fault, but your brain thinks it's your fault because that's how our brain works with shame. And so what you have to do is ask yourself, what do I blame myself for? Maybe I should have fought back. Maybe I shouldn't have fought back. We blame ourselves for both. And when you can actually take accountability, okay, I made that choice in that moment. I made it for a good reason. We understand because all behavior makes sense. How can I forgive myself for that? So one of the things that, and I know people are like, well, how do I forgive, right?
Right.
The quote that I love about forgiveness is a Lily Tomlin quote. And that is that forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. That's the first step, is being able to give up the fact that the past could have been any different. Often we want to attach it to a person. And it's hard to feel like I want to forgive somebody if they've done me wrong. We always apply the morality to it. And of course they've done wrong. That's not the question.
Right.
The question is, can you give up any hope that the past will be different? It's done. It can't be different.
Right.
And so if you can start to come to a place of, I give up all hope of a better past, then you're moving towards acceptance, right? And if you can move towards acceptance and you can move towards that forgiveness to eventually get to a point where you can be vulnerable now. Because remember, if you are vulnerable with your shame, it dissipates. If you have complex shame and you've kind of untangled it, you've forgiven yourself, you can be vulnerable. And if someone gaslights you, I don't care. Because I already know I'm already forgiven, right? And if someone forgives me, gives me compassion, that's great. It feels good because I've already given myself that compassion.
Right.
And so
that's something that I need to figure out how to do is, I don't want to say forgive myself, but I do have a lot of guilt in my whole, how everything transpired with my son. My first, I guess, regret is I shouldn't have even told him I was pregnant. And then I think about all the little things that I could have done differently, right? And, obviously it ended the way it ended. I definitely hold guilt. Now, I don't think that I played a part in my son's death, but, there's things that a mother will always just wish they did different and, in hopes of a different outcome. And that's just something that I have to make peace with.
Well, it's part of grief. It's part of grief. The bargaining stage is going back and saying, I wish I could have changed the past, right? I wish I could change the past. I don't know how often you've thought, okay, I made this decision to tell this man, and this led to my son's death. How can I take accountability for that and forgive myself for that decision? It almost seems unfair because we already know the logical answer.
Right.
You couldn't have known. That wasn't your fault. But if we do that thing that seems illogical and take accountability for that decision, understand why you made the decision and forgive yourself for it, and do that with all the little ones, that's when you're starting to get on your path.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. Very true. So, okay, let's talk about, you emphasize intentional sisterhood. Why is connection with other women such a powerful tool for healing?
It goes back to external compassion.
Okay.
We humans were not made to be alone, to live life alone. We are communal people. We just are. Cats are not. They do great, being all by themselves. Dogs don't. Dogs will die if you just leave them in isolation. Cats will be fine. So we have to understand that we are biologically wired to be in connection. And when we are able to be real and vulnerable in connection with other people, and that's what I talk about, sisterhood, that is when we can experience true freedom and living shame-free. And so we do have to be intentional way more than in the past because, people are forming friendships way less than they used to. People are not connecting in the way that we used to. And so it's not going to just happen. It doesn't even just happen at work. It doesn't, just
it's hard to meet people. It's hard to make friends.
It is. And so I encourage people as part of their health journey to be intentional about that.
Right. What's a good way to meet other women? Would you say like groups or, different online or activities, or what would you say?
Yeah. So I love groups. I love activities, things that you enjoy doing, finding groups that are doing the same thing, whether it's a cycle club or, an art club or a book club, whatever you're into. Obviously there's church and things like that. There are some wonderful ways to meet people online. I have prescribed to my clients. There's, I think, Bumble Friends.
Right. Okay.
Go on and you can find, there are apps for finding friendships. That is super intentional. And it seems counterintuitive when we talk about the fact that screens and social media, but if you actually use it to develop a in-person live relationship, it is very, very useful. And I've been
like they do for dating. Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because when I lived in New York City, I used dating apps all the time. It's the only way to meet people. In such a big city with people everywhere, you can't meet people.
You can't.
So it's very, very interesting. So how can people get your book?
Yeah, you can get my book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere they're sold. You can find it on my website as well, drzoeshaw.com.
Okay. I'll put that in the notes. And when does your next book come out?
My next book doesn't come out until next year. So 2027.
Well, you'll have to come back on.
Yeah, I would love to come back on and talk about your relationship with your mother, because that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But I'm starting something called a Stronger Woman Intensive, and that's for women who are struggling with codependency, with shame, and really want an intense way to work through it. I'm starting that, and you can find that information on my website.
Okay. Well, that sounds fantastic. And, I will definitely follow up, about your next book. But thank you so much for, the depth and the compassion and clarity you bring to such an important conversation. Every woman experiences some sort of shame or guilt. So, I hope this resonated with the audience in a way that's helpful. And I'll put all of your contact info in the notes. All right. So real quick, though, aside from you practice in California, do you do virtual? Can people reach out to you? Okay.
Yeah. So I do practice in California. Outside of California, I work as a relationship coach, and I see people all over the world.
Okay, perfect. So anyone can reach out to you and go from there.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Well, I may be one of your newest clients.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and we'll chat again.
Thank you, Allie. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
If there's someone that you want to hear from on this podcast, please feel free to send me an email. Or if you would like to be a guest, please reach out at allie@graysonschoice.org. If you would like to continue to hear our podcast, please consider donating at graysonschoice.org. Any amount helps to fund our mission to help protect our children.